Too often, people are mystified by all of the cybersecurity lexicon and phrases. Things like cybersecurity controls, standards, authorization to operate, ATO, security policies, and others. Let's spend a few minutes today kind of demystifying some of that complexity and lexicon that's associated with implementing a repeatable and trustworthy cyber strategy. Look, all of the words and lexicon is important, although at the end of the day, our cyber strategy really needs to focus on how do we reduce cost or at least understand cost, reduce risk, and how does this all benefit our organization. So let's start with discussing centralized management of your cybersecurity standards. And through this centralized management, you will enable your organization to share those standards among multiple security policies. I know that may sound like a little bit of a mouthful, so let's do this. Just imagine setting up a rule in your home that the bed should be made every time you wake up. The application of that rule stays consistent among all family members. Everybody is required to make their bed. But the manner in which the bed is made up, or the implementation, will vary dependent upon each family member. The security standard, in this example, making your bed every morning, is a single security standard that is applied to multiple security policies. In this example, a policy represents each of your family members. The creation, the management, the ability to inherit security controls to multiple security policies will indeed reduce the complexity of your cybersecurity strategy and increase efficiencies. But it's so much more than just the management of those standards and the ability to inherit those standards among multiple policies. We also have to be able to share that information both from distribution from a centralized site to decentralized sites, and that ability to share those standards and policies will unavoidably enhance the security at both of those sites. So the next logical step now is, how do we know once we've shared those security controls and standards that they're actually being applied properly within all of the organizations? This validation is really the third and final step that we're going to discuss today on how to drive down cost and enhance our security policy. Now, all the sites within your organization are efficiently managing their controls and procedures. We've already deployed those out. Everything's working great. But how do we validate that the language that they're using within their individual, or better put, site-specific implementation of the security standard aligns with the objective that's been outlined within the security standard you've deployed or established? Let's use an example. If I ask my son to complete a specific task, or in this case, implement a particular security standard, I'm keenly aware that my son's interpretation of my task objective will be different than mine. In fact, it may be considerably different. But the success of my son completing his task, as well as the success of the security standard you're asking to be implemented, will be very dependent on the validation of the implementation of that task or security standard. So a few hints that will save you some time and money, a few kind of gems to remember. Gem 1. The objective of your cyber standards should always stay consistent through your environment. And those cyber standards should be applied to multiple security policies. So again, establish a foundation of cyber standards in your environment that can be shared with multiple security policies. That's easy enough. Gem number 2. The implementation of your cybersecurity standards must be flexible to meet the individual needs of your security policies. Remember, we want to be able to apply that standardization because we're going to gain some cost efficiencies and really increase our security posture through that standardization. But we have to realize that the implementation of those cyber standards is going to require a lot of flexibility. Let me give you one last example before closing today. I have a standard of encryption. So my cybersecurity standard is encryption. And that cybersecurity standard, encryption, is part of, a component of my file sharing policy and my online store policy. You see, the file sharing policy implements key technologies to protect data stored on hard drives, because I'm going to have a lot of residual data that I want protected, or data at rest. In comparison, the online store has very little, if any, residual data. So my focus really through encryption, we're implementing the standard of encryption. I'm really focusing for my online store data in flight. The security standard encryption in this example is to protect both data at rest and data in flight. The security standard encryption stays consistent for both of my security policies, although the implementation has to be flexible, because the technologies that I'm going to use to implement data at rest for residual data is going to be considerably different, or may share similar traits, but will be different than how I implement encryption for data. Today, we've gone over a few key topics. How do I establish and manage cyber standards within my environment without having to know everything there is about cybersecurity? Well, the easiest way to do that is to establish a common framework of cyber standards that you can pull upon to meet the needs of your multiple policies. And we discussed in our example about making your bed how we have one standard, the objective to make our bed, and multiple policies, the family members, of how they implement that making of the bed. Last thing we talked about really is the flexibility required to enable those policies to be consistent. We want a consistent thread of standards in our example that we gave encryption, but we need that flexibility to enable encryption successfully.